Okay, this is a report on some really nice piece of research we did under the patronage of the Ethereum Foundation on minimum viable inflation. So this was the talk of the town last year around this time. Due to the proposed inflation schedule changes that were supposed to happen in the Pectra update, then this was shelved for the moment, and now we're seeing a little bit more buzz there talking about reinstating this possible changes. And this is a short version of a longer blog post that was actually written by my colleague Eric here. Yeah, if you want to see and read the full picture, I highly suggest you go and read about it. So what's happening today? We have used a stock and flow model, and if you don't know what a stock and flow model is, don't worry, I will give you a very short explanation. I'll keep it simple. To model the Ethereum staking dynamics with reinvestment, burn, etc. And we will look at 3 possible future scenarios, like negative scenarios, obviously, for Ethereum. The first one is runaway staking, which is the scenario in which, the tendency towards, like over very long time horizons, to a future in which near 100% of Ether is staked and the chain is very liquid. Obviously, this is a pretty negative scenario for everyone. Also, runaway inflation, excessive inflation, which is what most of the people who were interested in like this kind of changes to Ethereum inflation schedule were interested in, right? People want to protect their bags. And also governance centralization, which is not like physical centralization. It's economic centralization, right? So a very small number of economic parties holding most of the staked ETH. This is already happening. Okay, so let's focus on runaway staking today, though. So here is a diagram that represents the Ethereum staking model. So this is part of the stock and flow model we built. So what is a stock and flow model? Imagine these plazas, these circles here are some kind of tanks holding a liquid, okay? And this liquid is all the ether that was ever minted, okay? All the ether that has ever existed. Now, these 3 like tanks, well, U holds unstaked ETH, currently unstaked ETH. S holds staked ETH, and 0, O here, holds inaccessible ETH. So either burned, sent to the 0 address, whatever, lost the key, etc. So the arrows here are some kind of, like, if we're keeping the fluid analogy going, imagine this as tubes with one-way valves, okay, which, in which the liquid can move only in one direction. Okay, so here F is fees, okay, for validators, and it can also be just MEV, like fees plus MEV or just fees. Q plus is obviously staking, like new ETH. Q minus is unstaking. R is reinvestment. So like a more accurate picture should have a subset of U, okay, which is validator rewards, okay, and then R should go from validator rewards to S, and F should go to from U to validator rewards. Then B here is just EIP 1559 burn, I mean, everyone knows about this, and J slashing. Okay. But we also have this part here that comes from nothing, and this is the inflationary part, okay? So these are the rewards that basically get minted out of thin air to just, I mean, it's the inflationary part of it for validator rewards. Okay, so here's a table. We're not gonna go over the whole table, okay? Here's a table of like the flows, as I was like listing earlier, their symbols. Here we can see the validator reward subset, so a bit more precise than just the picture, and some very reasonable constraints we are subjecting these flows to. So for example, here, let's pick up an easy and reasonable one. So like base fees plus priority fees, so in general, like transaction fees, should be less than all the unstaked ETH. This is reasonable. We're starting from a very reasonable and simple set of assumptions, and we're building a complex model, okay? So everything you're gonna see here, it's just very simple pieces, okay, that build up to like something faithful and reasonable. Oh, and all the flows here are listed as averages or spot values. Like in our research, we have picked like quarterly averages, but in general, whatever like time span sounds reasonable to you, it's fine. Okay, so here is the actual like interesting part of this model, which is the dynamical systems part, okay? So these are the actual laws that govern the movement of the Ethereum, like ether fluid through the tanks. And it's, once again, very simple and very reasonable laws. So for example, the net change, so this E dot is a derivative, like a time derivative, okay? So the variation of all the ether that actually exists is given by the inflation, reasonable. Or like the variation of accessible ETH, so stake plus unstake, this A is accessible, is equal to the inflationary part minus the burn minus the slashing. So like we're stacking up these parts. So here we have chosen not to model EIP 7514, which poses some symmetric limits on the churn rate. So basically how much can enter or exit the validator set to, and this is to curb like very short-term peaks, spikes in validators entering or exiting. Okay, so this is some kind of measure to counteract runaway staking, but over short terms. Okay, so I mean, we can also add it, but the point of this is also of this research is also to look at like what happens where this is not like in place. Okay, so we also make some more assumptions, very reasonable, once again. So the first one is that issuance yield is sublinear. And this is in order to avoid something called discouragement attacks, which are attacks, economical attacks on the Ethereum consensus, like on the Ethereum validator set. And if you want to know more about this, this is a very important part of like looking at Ethereum like validator dynamics and Ethereum macroeconomics in general. I suggest you go and read Vitalik's paper about discouragement attacks. This is important, and this is a huge blocker in everything Ethereum macroeconomics. And also we assume that like the large stake scaling of yield is not altered by averaging over a reasonable time horizon rather than picking spot values. Okay, so how did we do this analysis? And I'm sure Eric will show you a bit more later about the nitty-gritty of it. So Eric built this very nice wrapper around like standard differential equation solver, which is called Ethode. And this has all kinds of niceties to model macroeconomic questions in Ethereum. So I highly suggest that if you're interested in general studying Ethereum inflation or any other kind of macroeconomic topic related to Ethereum, you go and use this or something similar. I mean, we at 20 Squares are very strong advocates of having a formal approach to studying this kind of economic questions in Ethereum and in blockchain in general. We should stop doing vibe-based economics, okay? No, oh, deflationary ETH because this protects my bags. Bullshit. No croissant inflation, no Twitter storms about this kind of stuff. Let's study about it, okay? Let's behave like real economists for once. So, like after our analysis, I'm gonna tell you what are the key takeaways of like our research. So the main takeaway is that we have identified a discipline one would need to follow in order to make runaway stake, to push runaway staking as far as possible as a problem, which is to keep a medium reinvestment rate, low inflation, low but positive, okay? And even lower fees. And without that, convergence to a desirable future without runaway staking is highly unlikely. Okay, why low but positive inflation? Well, in case of strong deflation, in which the magnitude of inflation exceeds the reinvestment rate of transaction fees, like this corresponds to unstable dynamics in the study. And in case of deflation that's too weak or zero, so it's not deflationary, sorry, I say deflation, inflation that's too weak or zero, like the tendency toward runaway staking can be moderated only by some stuff we don't want, like high churn rate or slashing. I mean, we don't want anyone to get slashed, and we want to moderate the churn rate. Okay, so in short, we can avoid runaway staking or like push it as far as possible only while inflation is held at the same time low enough such that concerns over inflation do not dominate their investment rate for validators, and high enough not to be numerically dominated by reinvestment of priority fees. Okay, so it's a very delicate equilibrium. But the main question, I guess you're all interested in, is should we reduce issuance? Are my bags gonna be magically improved and made heavier if we reduce issuance? Well, the answer is no, we shouldn't reduce issuance. This is a very delicate subject. The current approach to issuance we have is highly insufficient. If we want to touch this, we will need a lot more study. And it's not because I need to do this because it's my job. I mean, anyone else can do this. The thing is, no, let's not touch issuance for now. Okay, so, but Daniele, EAP 7514, you mentioned that this is a measure for limiting runaway staking over short time horizons. Does this also work over long time horizons? No. Okay, it doesn't solve the problem, like overall. It's just designed to limit spikes in churn rate. Okay, so I mean, the problem is that like runaway staking is kind of built in. And this is a problem that's mostly due to discouragement attacks. So the problem is that if we use a static, static, I mean just a curve for like inflation schedule, it's very hard to keep inflation sustained high enough but low enough, okay? In such a way that like taking discouragement attacks into account, so we also have to like work under the assumptions of sublinear yield in such a way. And if you're really interested in playing with it, maybe you will figure something out that we haven't figured out. I mean, you can go to GitHub, use our library, and maybe try playing with the parameters for EIP 7514, and maybe try decoupling their investment rate from new stake as much as possible. I mean, maybe it will come out of it, but I'm very skeptical about it. Okay, so, I mean, this is my part. Now, on to Eric.
Sit with us a moment. Here it is. Here it is. You got it? Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to give a brief review of what Daniele said with pictures, in case it was too abstract. Yeah, we'll start with the motivation. So what was going on was people. So first of all, what is yield? Yield is the percentage of Ethereum that is introduced into the ecosystem every year by validating, okay? So this is the yield curve. So you can see that that decreases as the amount that is staked increases, okay? And then people were noticing that the amount of stake was growing, especially with Lido and other LSTs, which is liquid staking providers. People were very worried that the sort of idea of the yield curve that they had just sort of made up because they had other problems to solve was not going to be sufficient, and that the winner-take-all nature of the LSD market would give a positive feedback loop where the percentage of ether that is staked increases, so that's little s goes to 1, and then this causes inflation, alpha, to rise, and then this, because everyone is going, oh no, all of my money is being inflated away, I have to stake just to keep from losing money, just to keep, you know, my bags from withering away, right? And so then this would cause more stake to go up, and so eventually we end up with, there is no more raw ether, there's only Lido, and we don't have a decentralized ecosystem, we have Lido. Which is, you know, Lido can be a great protocol, but it's not the vision of Ethereum, right? We wanted something a little more, not just a smart contract that has a, you know, some DAO or something, right? Okay, and so people were really worried about this, and you can hear, if you want to listen to what they were worried about and their concerns, there's a great channel on YouTube, and you can find Ethereum staking in-game, that one there in the middle, with the line under it. You can just hear Kaspar and Angsar talk about this concern. So this motivated this research. Okay, so what we did is, as Daniele said, I will not spend much time on this, but you have a balloon. The balloon inflates itself with the I term, and then there are some containers inside the balloon, some smaller balloons, if you will. And so there is the staked, the unstaked, and the burnt ETH. And then you have some equations that come from that. The top one is the one we're going to be spending the most time with. They're all sort of important. Let's see. Yeah, I could explain them. The one that I didn't mention is V, which is just this is the amount that is held by validators that is unstaked. So, because what happens is your ETH goes into the queue and it sits there, and then you claim it, and then it goes into the unstaked pool. And the fear is that, well, if everyone is just immediately selling all of that, then you have this huge sell pressure, right? And that causes this inflation. But what happens is, and this is very critical, what actually ends up happening is that you have, wow, I don't know if you can read that, but you have something called reinvestment, which is for a business to survive, you can't just sell all of your profits. Right? You have to reinvest some of them in the business. So part of that is you have to buy computers, you have to pay all nodes, whatever. The other part of it is you have got to keep increasing your stake, right? Because that's the thing that makes you money. Every business wants to make more money, and they want to make money doing the thing that they are doing, yes? So if you are serious about staking and not just doing it as a hobby, you will reinvest your profits. And this is why you don't see this immediate demand, this huge supply shock where people are just trying to sell off their ETH. Some of it gets reinvested. And this reinvestment ratio is absolutely critical if we really want to understand these things. So the way that we identified reinvestment as critical is we looked at all of these big, the big capital letters before were sort of stocks, and then we said there are flows that can be written as ratios of the stock, because you can't draw down more than is there. All right, and the consequence of this is this graph over here, which is this equilibrium staking fraction. All right, and you will notice that on I don't know if you can read this because it's very dim, but on your left, basically, which is like inflation is too low, on your left it is extremely high staking fraction, like 90% and above. So almost all ETH is staked. Maybe there's some that's used for settlement, but mostly people are not using ETH as an instrument directly. And so whoever has most of the ETH staked has a lot of control and governance. But if inflation is high enough, this is inflation per fees. If inflation is high enough, you can see intermediate values that are not just 90% and above. Okay, and so the system, we do find the system is drawn toward this stable point. And so you actually see this interesting thing where instead of inflation being this positive feedback loop, it actually has a moderating influence. Let's see. So I now want to talk about, so what actually happens with inflation? So Daniele has talked about all of that. I reset it in a different way. Hopefully one of us made sense. The top equation here, this is the total amount of accessible ether. The change in it over time is issuance minus burn minus slashing, okay? And so we're going to say, what actually happens to this over time? And the interesting thing is that there can be strong bounds you can place on with math. And you can say, look, I can say exactly how big this can be. Because the thing is that as you inflate, you're increasing the size of the thing. That pushes you further down on the staking. And you will find that although people think about it as a percentage, and that's how I introduced it, it does not scale. This bottom line, after you do a bunch of math, the bottom line here is that it does not go exponentially. So it's not really a percentage rate, because it's a constantly decreasing percentage rate. It's always smaller than an exponential. What does this mean? What this means is that if today, so this is a graph of if today staking, validating went up to almost near 100% of Ether, how high would the inflation rate be? If there was negligible burn, so we're just ignoring burn on the left here, if you look up in that upper left corner, you see it is about 6.5%. Now, that's not a great inflation rate, but this is the kind of inflation rate we have seen before in fiat economies, and the thing didn't burn down. So with burn, that gets reduced, but it can't last as long. It doesn't just continue forever. Because of this sub-leaning effect, this sub-exponential effect, you see about a decade of that, and then it's down. And it decreases. The higher it is, the faster it decreases over time. Whereas if you retain at low levels of staking, then you are looking down at a couple percentage of inflation, which once you subtract the burn, right now it's not even a positive. It's like 0.5%, I think, last time I checked. It is it's just small enough. And so this gives us the possibility of actually building in inflation hedges. And there's a lot of really interesting research that could be done here because, mostly we think about Ethereum with the price because it's so volatile. But you might expect that as more institutional players get involved, maybe the volatility goes down and the inflation rate starts to matter. And there are a couple, so classically, you would use commodities to hedge inflation because commodities have prices that if dollars are the thing that's inflating, then something that is more restricted than dollars and still in demand, like oil or uranium or gold, right? These things go up in price because the thing that they're valued in is inflating, and so there's you need more dollars to buy gold. So you could do something like that with BTC. But this gets questionable. Well, if Ethereum is, do we want to depend on another L1? But you as an investor could do that. You could say, well, I'm going to, use this as a hedge against this other thing because it's, it has a different issuance policy. You could also say, well, I'm going to use stable coins. I think that inflation is going to stay low at 3% like it has usually. That's an opinion you could have, and you could say, well, we're going to use USDC or Circle's Eurocoin, whatever you like. But there are other instruments as well. People might want to look at Squeeth. The funding rate right now is extremely high, so it is impractical to just buy this thing and leave it. But the mathematics behind it can be used to build something that is a little more interesting. The other thing is you have Euler Finance has, and many other protocols have done this thing where you split off the inflation, you split off the issuance or the inflation from the principal, and you can factor them into two different coins. People from TradFi they salivate at stuff like this because they know how to build, they know how to put these things together to build interesting instruments. And so this is, this would be a nice thing for them. So there's a lot of work here that we can done. I'm happy to talk more about it, but just, this is not just theoretical research. This stuff has real, actual, practical applications. You could make DeFi protocols based on some of this math. In summary, as Daniele said, we don't find a positive feedback loop. In fact, we find a negative feedback loop. Inflation has to stay away from zero in order to avoid runaway staking. But eventually, as I said, inflation will glide path to zero. It may take multiple decades, okay? So this is not an immediate concern. But eventually it does go away, and once it goes away, you're guaranteed to hit 100% inflation if we have not done anything, if we have not adopted a dynamic yield curve or something. And yes, as Daniele said, if you reduce issuance, you are just making this problem worse. So you're just speeding up the time until you go to S equals 1, 100% inflation. If you want to read more, if this did not make sense, but you're interested in it, we wrote a whole blog post on this, and you can take one sentence at a time and think about it instead of trying to keep up with us blathering. So take a look at it. The address is there. Our blog is easy to find, 20squares.xyz. Okay, are there any questions for either of us?